What if the voice that changes everything doesn't come from a famous stage, but from a trailer park on the edge of nowhere? What if greatness isn't about being seen by the world, but by just one person who refuses to look away? This is the story of a 12-year-old girl with a voice no one expected, and the kind of courage that only grows in silence. In a weather-beaten trailer nestled in the shadow of broken telephone poles and rusted mailboxes, on the outskirts of Leach, Texas, lived a girl named Sophie Lane. The tin roof above her room clanged each morning with the sighs of the southern wind, and the scent of early dough from the local bakery clung to her school uniform before she ever reached class. Every morning, long before the sun warmed the earth, Sophie rose, not to scroll through phones or fuss over outfits, but to join her mother, Joanne, in scrubbing the floor of a bakery that barely paid enough to cover groceries. Joanne was a wiry, determined woman with calloused palms and eyes like moonlit water. She often told her daughter, "Kindness costs nothing, but it pays for everything." Their mornings were quiet, not somber, but grounded, like two souls who had learned to walk softly in a world that didn't always listen. Sophie didn't talk much at school. Her patched-up uniform and frayed sneakers made her a magnet for mockery in the halls of Winslow Elementary. Laughter, when aimed at her, wasn't the warm kind. But even in that silence, her eyes spoke volumes. They held a music yet unsung, like lullabies whispered to the stars when no one else is awake. One Monday morning, the school principal's voice crackled over the intercom with a message that would quietly change everything. "Welcome to Talent Week. Any student interested in performing may sign up outside the office by Wednesday." The room lit up with chatter. Students plotted TikTok routines and drum solos. Names flew onto the sign-up sheet with excitement, bold and unapologetic. But Sophie said nothing. That night, after washing the last dish and brushing flour from her fingers, she listened to an old cassette her mother had once recorded. Just her mother's voice, singing lullabies that had wrapped Sophie in comfort through many fevered nights. One song lingered in her thoughts. Scarboro Fair, a folk song as old as longing. She took out her notebook and slowly wrote her name on a slip of paper. Sophie Lane, singing. The next morning, her fingers trembled as she stood before the bulletin board. The list was nearly full. The voices of other students echoed in her ears. With one deep breath, she pressed her name onto the final empty line. And then, the whispering started. "Sophie Lane? Singing? Maybe she'll do it with a mop. Hope the rice cooker's in tune." Laughter trickled down the hall, careless and sharp. But Sophie didn't cry. She simply walked away, clutching the same notebook, lyrics scrawled in her careful, slanted handwriting like they were pieces of armor. That evening, her mother found her rehearsing in her room, voice soft, shaking but clear. Clear like wind passing through a window left ajar. Joanne sat beside her, folding herself into the space like she'd done when Sophie was small. "You know," she said, "I used to dream of singing on a stage too. But then your grandma got sick, and I had to trade my dreams for duty. I've never regretted that. But if I saw you up there, even once, it would be the most beautiful gift life ever gave me." Sophie blinked up at her, voice barely a whisper. "Will you come?" Joanne nodded. "Even if I have to crawl there." Rehearsal day came. Sophie was the final name called. The music teacher raised an eyebrow. "Do you have a backing track?" "No, ma'am. I'll sing a cappella." Some students rolled their eyes. One snorted. But then she began. "Are you going to Scarboro Fair?" There was no microphone, no glitter, no polished bravado. Just a girl with a voice raw as morning dew and strong as silence. The kind of voice you don't just hear, you feel. The teachers stopped mid-sentence. The classroom stilled. The only sound was Sophie's voice, threading through the air like a forgotten breeze. When she finished, no one clapped. Not because they didn't want to, but because they didn't remember how. Later that evening, as they walked home beneath a dusky sky, Sophie asked, "Mom, if they laugh, should I stop?" Joanne gripped her hand, smiled, and answered, "No, baby. You keep singing. Because somewhere out there, someone needs your song more than they need their pride. Talent Week arrived. Winslow Elementary's auditorium bloomed with decorations and stage lights. Students performed with bravado, pop songs, dance battles, booming drums. Sophie waited backstage, alone. Her white dress, the only one intact in her closet, had been ironed with careful love by her mother the night before. Her hair was braided neatly, and in her hands was that same faded notebook. Then her name was called. Some kids giggled. Phones were raised, not to honor her but to record whatever embarrassment might follow. She stepped forward. Her eyes scanned the blinding stage lights. She couldn't see her mother, but she knew where she sat. Third row by the window. That was enough. And once again, she sang. Are you going to Scarboro Fair? This time something different happened. The whispers died. A hush took over, not of boredom, but of reverence. A quiet that said, we didn't expect this. We weren't ready for this. One teacher paused mid-note. A parent wiped his glasses. And when Sophie sang the final line, the silence cracked open into applause. First soft, then rising like a tide. One person stood, then two, then all. Sophie didn't move. Not out of fear, but because in that moment she knew something had shifted. She was no longer that poor girl. She was a voice, a story, a light. After the performance, as the crowd began to disperse, a woman with a gentle face and a conductor's badge approached her. You must be Sophie Lane. I'm Clara Jensen, conductor of the City Children's Choir. I was here to watch my daughter. But you are the one who moved me. Would you come to the studio for an audition? There's a scholarship we'd like you to try for. Sophie turned to her mother, uncertain. Joanne's eyes were already glistening. Go, she whispered. Go, baby girl. This world has waited long enough to hear you. That Saturday, Sophie entered a recording studio for the first time. The walls were covered in acoustic foam. The air smelled of quiet dreams. Clara had picked them up from the bus station and offered nothing but gentle words and tea. Just sing the way you did that day, she said. Sophie clutched her notebook. No makeup artist. Just her old white blouse and jeans. Leo, the studio engineer, glanced at Clara skeptically. This is the kid? Trust me, she replied. Let her sing. And she did. Again, Scarboro Fair. This time in a room that had heard thousands of voices, but maybe never one so real. When she finished, no one spoke. Then Leo leaned into the mic. You haven't had training, have you? No, sir. He nodded slowly. Then you've got something they can't teach. That afternoon, Clara sent the recording to the admissions board of Emerson School of Music, a selective summer program for rural talents. Only 2 students are chosen each year. You don't have to outshine anyone, Clara told her. Just be the son you already are. 3 weeks later, a blue envelope arrived. Joanne opened it with trembling hands. Dear Sophie Lane, we are deeply impressed by your recording. We are honored to invite you to Emerson's Distinguished Summer Scholarship Program. All tuition, travel, and lodging expenses will be covered. Joanne cried. Sophie didn't. She simply whispered, Mom. I got in. Emerson Conservatory was a world apart. Historic buildings with painted glass, students with designer bags and years of training. Sophie arrived in secondhand jeans and a heart full of melody. Orientation was led by Clara. Her voice echoed across the domed hall. We don't seek perfection here. We seek truth. We seek stories. But not everyone agreed. In vocal workshops, Sophie struggled. She didn't know terms like resonance or larynx placement. One girl, Eliza, whispered, Guess they made a mistake this year. Each night, Sophie would sit alone on the porch of the dorm. Until one night, Clara joined her. I don't think I belong here, Sophie admitted. Neither did I once, Clara said. But one professor told me, technique can be learned, soul cannot. Sophie smiled faintly. For the first time in days, she believed it. For the final showcase, students had to perform solo. Eliza chose an opera aria, others picked Broadway hits, Sophie chose her mother's song. You Are My Sunshine. Simple, honest, home, no instruments, just her. When she stepped on stage during rehearsal, the room wasn't ready. Eliza put down her pen. One instructor blinked hard. And when she sang, the words echoed like memories. You make me happy. When skies are gray. No one clapped. But no one forgot. Showcase night arrived. The rain fell gently in Austin. Umbrellas lined the street. Parents filled the grand concert hall. Joanne arrived damp and exhausted, but she sat in the fourth row, holding a box of pastries, and her breath. When Sophie was introduced, some whispered, "A folk song? Really?" But Sophie walked out, a blue dress stitched from old blouses, a pendant around her neck, her mother's hands holding dreams. She couldn't see the audience, but she remembered the rain, her mother's voice, her own. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. The auditorium froze, then rose. Joanne stood first, not to clap, but to stand, for every night, every note, every no that had led to this yes. The applause that followed wasn't thunder.